So bearings are all over your e-bike, be it in the wheels, the pedals, the bottom bracket, but today we're going to be taking a look at the headset. This little guy's under a lot of stress from the forks and the front wheel firing debris into that. Tiny little bearings, top and bottom. Today we're going to be taking a look at adjusting your headset and some common headset problems. Most headsets are really well sealed from the elements. They have a rubber seal on the top and the bottom. It stops all that mud, trail debris going in. But what you will find is water will penetrate those seals from the top of the stem. It will creep in down this fork steerer. Also firing up from the front wheel. This is actually under a lot of pressure from that dirt and water collecting around that bearing, as well as getting impacted into that bearing as well from the fork going up and down. Really is a trap for all your dirt, mud and water. So one of the most common problems with the headset is it actually coming loose. You'll notice when you rock the front brake, you actually feel movement in that top cup, rocking back and forward. It can be even literally a millimeter, but that millimeter, when transferred to the leverage of the forks and the front wheel moving, it actually increases that by like 10 times. So a tiny millimeter of play in that headset will be massively noticeable on your bike. Easiest way of checking that is applying the front brake, just putting your fingers around the top of the head tube and the top of the headset and just checking that that's nice and snug. If it's loose, the headset's going to be rocking whilst your frame's staying still and you'll feel movement there. So another really easy way of checking that headset as well is getting the bike on the back wheel, holding onto your back brake and literally bouncing that bike up and down, sort of pogoing it on the back wheel. If that headset's loose, you'll see the fork moving and you actually be able to hear that headset clicking and knocking away. So if that headset's feeling rough, it could be that water's got into there. Easy way of checking that is the top of your crown. Just have a look around here, especially on the back of the steerer. You'll see water runs, could be some rust looking around the bottom. Rust in your headset obviously isn't good. It means water's in there, it's took that grease out and your headset's gonna be running really rough. So when testing your headset, just make sure that those bars are free running, lock to lock. Just make sure there's no tight spots, no noises. That should be totally silent and 100% free running. So if you do find that headset is running tight or feels rough, it could be one of two things. Too much preload on that bearing, meaning the top cap's been done up too tight, compressing the bearings, making them run rough. Or the other thing could be water ingress or the bearings have run out of grease. The only way you're gonna find that out is by dropping the headset out of the bike. So if you are experiencing a loose headset, here's how we're gonna remedy it. Basically, you need to undo your stem bolts, which are on the side of the stem, usually 4 or 5 mil. So what you find on top of the stem is the preload cap. What this does is basically preloads those bearings. When I say preload, I'm on about not swinging on the end of that Allen key, pulling it round as tight as you can. This literally can be done with a short end of the Allen key, just literally tightening it up, nice, but not too tight. Constantly just checking that movement in the headset. I can still feel there's a couple of mil play in there, so I just increase it, maybe like 1/4 of a turn at a time, just checking till that movement's gone. If you do it up too tight, you're basically going to crush those bearings. Once those bearings are damaged, the headset's going to be constantly running rough. So just make sure you're not over tightening that headset. Increasing it 1/4 by 1/4 of a turn, checking that, and I can feel there's no movement in that headset. So the headset's nice and tight now. All that movement has been removed by tightening that top cap. What I'm going to be doing now is just checking that the stem is still nice and straight in line with the front wheel. And then I'm going to get my torque wrench out. Just checking on the side of the stem, usually it's written the manufacturer's torque settings. Just make sure you've adjusted your torque wrench and just nip that stem up nice and tight. So if you find yourself constantly adjusting that headset, it could be your staff angled nut is actually rusting and pulling its way up the steerer or breaking down. So I mentioned a lot of water enters that steerer. These things can rust out, crack, and generally just creep up the steerer. As you're tensioning the top bolt, preloading it, it's basically sliding up the steerer as you're doing that bolt up. So just make sure that's in good condition and it isn't creeping up the steerer as you add the tension to the top bolt. So if you can't remove that play from the headset, it basically could be that the steerer is buttoned up against the bottom of the top cap. What it does need is a 3 to 5 mil gap below the preload cap to let the steerer slide through the headset and compress the bearings. If it's hitting that, you're never going to be able to adjust that headset and will constantly be coming loose. So you've done all those adjustments that we talked about, but there's still that movement in the front wheel. It can be a number of things on the front end of the bike, so it's worth checking these things out. So the first thing I would check is that that front wheel is actually done up nice and tight in the dropout. If your axle's loose, it's going to allow that wheel to move and can actually feel sometimes like a loose headset. So the next thing I would be checking also is that your front disc is nice and tight. A few different ways of mounting these. Usual way is a 6-bolt disc. Just make sure those bolts are nice and tight holding on the disc, or if you've got center lock, just make sure that it's nice and tight too. So another thing that feels really similar to a loose headset is actually your brake pads moving in the caliper when you pull that front brake on. They're rocking back and forwards whilst gripping onto that rotor. Usually wouldn't affect the bike because the wheel's moving forward and the pads only move one way, but when you pull it, rocking it, you're feeling the backwards and forwards movement of those pads. Sometimes the forks will actually have a bit of movement in. It's just the bushes and the seals. Sometimes they'll rock back and forward. When you pull that front brake, you'll notice a bit of movement in there. Could be your fork needs a service, or sometimes the cheaper forks actually have that little bit of movement in, so don't confuse that with a loose headset. So if you keep tightening that headset and it's creeping loose, especially after big jumps and heavy landings, what it can be is a flared head tube. I mean a flared head tube, basically this area gets oversized and your bottom headset cup doesn't fit in the frame, so it's constantly rocking. Fortunately, if this is the case with your bike, it's fit for the bin, or you need to send it back for warranty. Hope you've enjoyed today's video on how to adjust your headset on your e-bike. Whilst you're here, make sure you check out how to convert to tubeless down here. And don't forget, if you've got any comments, tips, please leave them in the box below. Make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so.